It's Monday, September 22nd, and we have loads to talk about, including the tropics and a big severe weather system that's expected to impact the United States today. But starting out here in the tropics, here is Hurricane Gabrielle. It's really starting to get an intensification look to it. We can even see that eye starting to build at the center of the storm. I think we're about to see some big intensification here, potentially into a major hurricane, or at least that's what the National Hurricane Center is expecting it to do as it skirts past Bermuda. And then talking about skirting past Bermuda, it looks like the brunt of the storm is going to completely miss Bermuda entirely, which is great news, but I still definitely would prepare for tropical storm impacts for the island. And here's the cone of uncertainty, kind of just going over what I just said again. And here is Hurricane Gabrielle. It's expected to turn into a major hurricane as it goes past Bermuda, but likely it's mostly going to miss the island. Still to be surprised to see some tropical storm impacts here, and then definitely some strong rip currents and big surf. But after that, it looks like it's going to curve back into the Atlantic and then kind of be out of our hair. But unfortunately, Hurricane Gabrielle is not the only disturbance out here in the Atlantic. We actually have two separate ones. One with the higher probability looks like it's going to kind of do the same thing that Gabrielle is doing, just going to follow a very similar track, potentially skirting by or impacting Bermuda. It's a little too early to tell, but it looks like it's just going to curve back into the Atlantic. Not much to worry about there. But this one in the yellow, this invest that has a 30% chance of formation, I think is going to be the one to watch for the next couple of days. Now, models have kind of shown a mixed opinion on whether this will form, but the current direction that it's expected to go in could potentially see it making impacts to the United States if it were to form, which is still at a 30% probability. And then here is the Euro model. A couple things I want to point out. Here is Hurricane Gabrielle skirting back out into the Atlantic, not hurting anybody. And then we have a couple of tropical waves that we're going to watch. This is our 60% chance of formation. Then this one a bit more west is our 30% chance of formation. We're going to see that our 60% chance of formation is expected to grow into a pretty formidable storm, really taking a almost identical path to Gabrielle at the moment. Now, is this set in stone? No, but this is something that we could probably expect to see something pretty similar to. And then the Euro is not predicting formation of that 30% probability. However, other models like the GFS are. So definitely want to stay weather aware of the 30% probability invest off the coast. Then, of course, we're going to continue to see tropical waves push off the coast of Africa, potentially forming into storms and potentially moving into the Gulf for more development. So we're definitely going to want to stay very vigilant of the tropics until at least the end of early October. But moving back to the mainland United States, and we have a big one for severe weather today. We have two very large separated marginal risk of severe weather and then two isolated slight risk within those marginal risks. Now, the main risk today is going to be some scattered damaging winds. Of course, with that probability being the highest in that slight risk, we could potentially see up to 60 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts. Now, I also do think there is a potential for seeing some stronger wind gusts out here in eastern New Mexico, potentially a Boeing segment forming. That's not currently highlighted by the SPC, but that's definitely something that I would want people down there to kind of stay weather aware of. And then on top of the risk of some damaging winds, there's also going to be that risk of hail. We can see that that risk is pretty much going to be entirely zero in our more eastern marginal risk area, but we're definitely still going to want to look out for it more further out west, out in the plains, potentially seeing some larger hailstones in that 1 to 2 inch in diameter range. And then for tornado risk, we actually do have one today. It's going to be a very small isolated 2% though, however, in northern Oklahoma and portions of far southern Kansas. So potentially a couple of spin up tornadoes possible. And this is going to be the region we're going to really want to keep our eyes on today, out here in the southern and central plains, potentially getting a lot of storm development around the late afternoon to early evening hours. We're really going to want to look for a big complex of storms along a cold front and then low pressure system, kind of moving through along with a trough. This is mostly just going to be a really outflowy segment of storms. And when that low level jet kicks in, we could potentially see a tornado threat with this as well in that region highlighted in northern Oklahoma and then far southern Kansas. And also that threat for hail could increase marginally when that low level jet increases as well. That would be in the early evening hours. That is when we could potentially see the largest of hail with this complex. Now, we also could see that threat for tornadoes momentarily increase when a trough kind of collides with our complex of storms up here, potentially increasing some pockets of vorticity. Then just that general threat for severe weather could increase during that time. So we could see some stronger wind gusts, some larger hail, and then just really a higher risk of severe weather altogether. But that would be more hypothetical. But the main thing is that if you're in this area, just want to stay weather aware for all hazards of severe weather. Now, further up north, we also have a low pressure system and then frontal activity going on up here, potentially bringing a pretty strong line of storms to Iowa, then also parts of Nebraska, which could potentially see that threat for some hail and damaging winds as well. Then also in the earlier hours of the day, so I'm talking about mid-afternoon to late afternoon, we could see a blowing segment in eastern New Mexico, potentially bringing some strong outflowy gust. And moving a bit east, we can really see that big line of storms, which is really going to be messy and kind of disorganized out here in our far eastern marginal risk today. Potentially, we could see a low pressure system kind of tracking up a trough. That's going to be the main causer of all this weather, and it looks like it's going to kind of peak around the early to mid-afternoon hours, kind of when those ingredients kind of refuel in front of these storms. But after that, it really looks like they're just going to become outflowy messes around the evening and night hours. And here's a better look at that line of storms in Iowa, potentially getting pretty strong, actually seeing some hail, some gusts, and actually a non-zero tornado potential, although it's pretty close to zero. Just want to stay weather aware up here in Iowa. That's going to be the main thing. And here's a better look at that trough, which is really going to be the main causer of all of our weather today. And we can see that our weather pattern is going to kind of follow the shape of this pretty much exactly. We can see it kind of curving up in that far eastern marginal risk. That's going to help to initiate a lot of those storms out there as well. And then we see that ridge kind of pinching our far southern plains, then lower central plains risk area, bringing some more organizational shear, then also a couple of short waves moving through. That's going to be the main thing with that as well. And then also up here farther up north, we also can kind of see where that front is straight down from that big low pressure center from our trough as well. But taking a deeper dive into the environments, this is going to be our all hazards risk in the southern and central plains, potentially seeing that risk for tornadoes, damaging gusts, and some hail. It looks like that risk for tornadoes is going to be pretty contingent on if we don't really have that many showery storms out in the earlier portions of the day. That could potentially stabilize our environment quite a bit, which would lower that risk as well. But the main things to take away are that our shear parameters are not going to be bad at all for some organized storms. 40 knots of bulk shear, and then also our low level shear isn't going to be poor at all. Even our photograph shows some curvature in the lower levels. Our mid-level lapse rates are also going to be quite good with a freezing level that isn't super high. So coupled with those stronger updrafts and even some wind veering, we could see some damaging winds and then some smaller hail, likely in that 1 to 2 inch in diameter range. Probably going to be on the lower echelon of that until the low level jet kicks in. Then it will probably climb to the higher echelon of that. But we also have definitely enough moisture for storm 65 dew point and sufficient cape around 2500 cape. The main thing is just going to be, is this going to be here, this big cap? And if it were not, I definitely think there'd be a higher potential for more widespread severe weather, but if it were to, that would hinder our risk for everything quite a bit. Then moving to the more northern portions of our risk, so specifically that line of storms in Iowa, and then some of our storms in Nebraska, our environment looks pretty primed up here for seeing some severe weather as well, and actually a non-zero tornado potential. I'm going to call that because our shear parameters in the lower levels aren't super duper terrible. We will have a low enough cloud base and quite a bit of 3 capes. So potentially a couple of spin up tornadoes up here as well. But the main thing is going to be that damaging wind threat. And then also some hail. We have a 67 dew point and then also quite a bit of cape around 3000. So very favorable for severe weather. For hail, we have a pretty nice mid-level lapse rate, a pretty low freezing level, and then quite a bit of cape up here near that freezing level. The only thing is that our bulk shear is going to be a little bit lower in this region, so those updrafts will not be as strong, and then we really have a lack of any wind veering at all going on. But definitely some hail in that 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter range up here. Then for our threat of some damaging winds, quite a bit of dry air aloft, a higher precipitable water, and then even a downdraft cape of 1000. That's not super high, but I definitely think with these organized storms that I think we'll see, probably some 60 to 70 mile an hour gust up here as well. And this is just going to be a quick peek at our far eastern marginal risk. The main takeaways are that we're going to have enough moisture, enough CAPE for some severe weather. And then our shear parameters actually aren't going to be that bad. We could potentially see a spin up tornado or two along this because our 3 CAPE isn't that poor. Our cloud bases will be low enough. And then in front of that low pressure system, which is going to kind of trail up that trough, our shear is not going to be bad at all. We even have some curvature on our hodograph here. So definitely wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a spin up tornado. The main thing hindering that though is going to be how messy and disorganized that storm mode is expected to be. So it looks like it's mainly just going to be some outflowy winds, and that threat for hail is going to be completely non-existent. So the main thing with all of these risk areas is just stay weather aware and look for those weather alerts from the National Weather Service.